Welcome to the Alain Elkann interviews, an unprecedented window into the minds of some of the most well-known and respected figures of the last 25 years.
Gabrielle, you are a successful producer. How many films did you produce or co-produce?
Oh la la, I've lost count. But probably around between 15 and 20.
And tell me, what is the secret of a producer? I imagine you receive hundreds of scripts, of proposals and things like that. What is making you decide to produce a film?
Well, generally, I really actually develop the things that I make. It's rare that it comes from outside. And if it does, then it's something that I get very, very involved in the development. And I think you've just really got to have passion because it's very hard. You've got to really love it and believe in it and feel that it's got to be in the world. And that's what keeps you going and sustains you.
You have an independent company, right?
Yes, I do. With an office in London and in New York.
But you are also an executive producer.
It's from nuts to bolts. I mean, generally it sort of starts from the genesis. It can be from a book or it can be from an idea, sometimes an original screenplay. And then it's about working on the script with the writer, hopefully a director sooner than later, sometimes with a director from the get-go. It's about the creative development, putting together the whole team from the cast to all of the technical crew. And then, I'm there every day, basically, when we're shooting. And then I'm through it post-production and I raise the money to get them made.
You were very, very successful with many films. In particular, we remember very well Filomena, a film that got plenty of awards, Oscar nominations, had a great success, and it was coming from a book, right?
Yes.
When you produced that film, did you imagine such a success?
I got Judi Dench involved in that very, very early on. Even before we had the script. And I felt that if we could get her involved, it would really make a huge difference. So she came on board very, very early on, as did Steve Coogan, who I really developed with. And so having her involved always gave me great hope. She is so loved, and she's such a great actress. I guess when she got involved, and I had real confidence in it, we actually moved away quite a bit from the book itself. It really became more about how the book got written. So that was an interesting journey. We actually left the book aside, and then it became really about how the writer embarked on the journey with the real Filomena.
Mainly, we talk about series which are so successful at the moment. You seem to produce films who are more artistic, poetic. And as you said, for Judi Dench, you have a male actor who is Ralph Fiennes that you work with often.
Yes.
And you just produced an amazing film called Dig, which just started to go into Netflix. It seems to be an amazing success, and it is such a sophisticated and unusual small story somehow. Can you tell me a little bit about this film? How did you decide to do it? Why in this very moment you decide to do this kind of film?
Well, there was a screenplay when I got on board, but then, we worked a lot on it over the 8 years that it took to make it. I'd read the book, I'd read an original screenplay, which then we did quite a lot of work, to get to where it was. But it was more than an 8-year journey to make it happen. So it didn't happen overnight. And so I think that it is just a story that really resonates right now more than ever.
Let's talk briefly, very shortly about the story. The story implies that there is an amateur archaeologist, right, who is Ralph Fiennes, who somehow is digging for the account of a private person into a kind of private land and is looking for...
We're looking for treasure. I mean, the woman, Edith Pretty, had a very, very strong sense that there was something on her land. She was, in her own way, sort of an amateur archaeologist too, and she had this sense. And I think that the fact of finding treasure in your garden, I think, is something that appeals to everybody, actually.
How did she know that there was a treasure?
She didn't, but it was a hunch, a guess. It was a feeling. It was
right, quite an odd feeling, right?
It was. I mean, these were, of course, burial grounds. I mean, they were known to be ancient burial grounds. So it wasn't impossible that there would be something in them. And over the years, people actually had gone into them and taken things out of them. But I mean, this was over centuries, actually. So the fact that in just before, as the Second World War is looming, that she decides, at that moment in time to do something like that, I think that was, extraordinary. It was that thing of carpe diem, seize the moment and do it now.
And it is a real story, isn't it?
Absolutely. And the treasure can be seen in the British Museum now.
Who is Ralph Fiennes? Why he arrives there with his bicycle and starts digging?
Well, he was also known in the region to be somebody who was passionate about archaeology and also astronomy. He was just an original, somebody who didn't have any formal education, but, was self-taught. It had to do with his own innate intelligence and fascination with the land that he grew up on and, a sense of also curiosity. And I think that the fact that also these were two people from very different backgrounds that came together.
And they start discovering this amazing boat.
And nobody had any sense of what they would find.
And you would also expect, but it's not coming, a love affair between him and the lady who owns the land.
No, the class was so different. And what's so beautiful is their shared passion for something. But it's, it's platonic, and it is that thing of people coming together and sharing something and doing something remarkable together.
And was she really very ill, like in the film?
Yes, she was.
Because this determines a great insecurity in her child, who becomes very attached to this archaeologist, to this man. And until the end of the movie, we don't know what is going to happen to that child.
No, that's not our story. Our story is about that moment in time.
And your story is also the fact that he was not recognized, right? He's the one who found this boat, but when the official archaeologists come, they put him aside and she defends him.
Yes.
But until very, very late, they will not recognize his job, his work, right?
That's correct. Yeah. And really, actually, I think this film will probably only really give him the recognition that's due.
How did you decide, and what was the attitude of Ralph Fiennes in front of this story, who comes out now in Netflix in the middle of this pandemic time? And what made you decide that this would have been such a successful story, and that so many people talk about it?
You don't ever know. That's what's sort of quite phenomenal. I'm actually reeling right now from how wonderful a response we're getting. I'm so moved by that. You don't expect, you don't know. When you make something, of course, you hope, you believe in it, but you don't necessarily know how people are going to respond to it. I felt it was such a moving story, and we've had such a great group of talent. Simon Stone is a really brilliant young director and sort of a visionary, and he brought something to it that gave it a whole other dimension. I gave Rafe the script to read about, I guess, 6 years ago, and I remember when he read it on an airplane, and he called me right after reading it, and he was really so moved by it, partially because he actually comes from that part of the world. He was born in Ipswich, which is near where, Sutton Hoo was, is. His father was somebody who was very connected to the land. So as a story, it spoke to him very personally. So he was very moved by it. And he went to extraordinary lengths to really become, I think, and engage with this person and understand who Basil was. He fell in love with Basil, actually.
And the actor fell in love with the character?
Yes. I think you feel that, don't you? That connection that he has with this character.
Yes, It's like if he was real, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that Netflix, the fact that the film is launched on Netflix, that's sad in a way that is not in the cinemas because cinemas are closed.
Yes.
You think that awkwardly it helped the launch of the film, the fact that there's so many people around the world that can see it on the same time?
I think it has. For me, it's been fascinating to watch how we've had a captive audience and that the conversation, that there's this thing of sharing, people sharing something all together, all around the world at the same time. It's phenomenal. I've never experienced actually reactions like I'm getting with this film. It's very moving.
And do you think that in this film there is a message in the sense that life goes on, passions go on, even if there is impending war, right? I mean, the war is there and still they are digging and thinking about the discovery. And then now we live in a kind of a war, right?
Absolutely. I think it's resonating. I think it's true that, we get through these things, we will survive it, we will learn from it, and it's part of the cycle of history.
Of course, you're pleased, but in the same time, are you worried about the fact that cinemas are closed?
Oh, of course.
And that people cannot see the film on a large screen?
Yes, and I mean, the intention was for this film to go out in cinemas before it actually went up on the platform. So it was really heartbreaking, for that not to happen. And I felt particularly bad for the director, who's a young director who's not had that much experience with his films being put out into the world. And I think it was very, very hard for him not to have any feedback. But I think now it's overwhelming. I think it's beyond anything that could have happened.
A film that is going into Netflix like this cannot go to festivals like Cannes or like Venice or like Sundance, can it?
No, we could have. If there had not been a pandemic, we would have absolutely gone to festivals.
It is the kind of film who would have gone to festival and eventually win awards, right?
Well, I'm glad you say that and think that. I think so too. And it was very sad. I mean, we'd hoped we would be able to go to Venice. But then when, the pandemic, just everybody, there was, decisions basically with a lot of the major companies not to go to festivals just because that was just a decision that people made across the board just out of security. And it was very painful, as filmmakers to lose that moment of sharing and putting something out there. Festivals will come back, and I think cinema will come back. I'm a great believer in it. I think there's nothing like having that collective experience of being in a room with people watching something.
But you think that the film will go into movie houses later?
Well, maybe. People have been asking me that question. I don't know the answer. That will be a Netflix decision, but it would be glorious if it did get a chance to actually get seen on big screens, and maybe that will be able to happen.
I ask you a question because I don't know, but this year we won't have Oscar awards, or we will have Oscar awards?
I believe we will. I mean, already people are looking at films and considering them for BAFTA and the Academy. So yes, I mean, the plan is, I think...
And there is a chance that this film can eventually go to the Oscars or the BAFTA?
Yes, no, absolutely. Yeah, it's there for people to... in those, organizations, the Academy and the BAFTAs, to watch, consider, and vote for if they believe that it should be rewarded.
Right. What do you think? In the movies, we see two kinds of things. In one way, we see a lot of very violent movies. And then people also seem to like sagas, family sagas, especially in the past, and especially they like very much kind of upper class stories as well as the violent films. Do you think that people are in need of more poetry, of more feelings?
Absolutely. Those are the kinds of stories I've always wanted to put out into the world. I mean, I think that there's enough violence and pain, and we don't necessarily need to put more of it out.
Because there is a moral in the film, right? The fact that these people battle in a terrible moment, she is ill, war is there, and so on and so forth, to find this treasure. but the establishment is taking over and they are completely dismissed for a long time, right?
Yeah.
There is a big injustice. Do you think that people may be touched by that?
I think so. I think it's very, very touching. There is something interesting too that we didn't go into saying it, but, actually Winston Churchill did want to knight Peggy and give her a damehood. She said no, thank you. For her, it wasn't about her, it was about the discovery. There was a selflessness about it. And it's also that, I think, that sense of actually, respecting history and sharing it.
So in a way, you're glad that you gave justice to this story. And
Yes.
Eventually, when museums will be open again, people may go to the British Museum and see it, right?
Oh, I think it'll be a wonderful thing for the British Museum. I know people are dying to go and see it all now.
Tell me, what is your professional relationship with Ralph Fiennes? What kind of an actor he is? You did several films with him, right?
Well, I got to know him as an actor because he starred in a film that I produced some years ago called The Duchess, and we got to know each other then. And, you find people who are kindred spirits, who have a similar sensibility. I kind of feel like he's a soulmate in a way. And after we'd made that film, he wanted to direct his first film, and he asked me to help him, which was a real honor. It's a wonderful film. I think it's a film that should be actually on Netflix. It should be seen much more. Actually, people often say to me that they think it's, one of their favorite films, and definitely one of their favorite adaptations of Shakespeare. Yeah.
Maybe he will go into Netflix.
Yeah, be great.
You have new ideas for the future? You are working on new projects?
Yes, I am. I've got something. I'm working with, Simon Stone, who directed this. We're working on something, a couple of other things. And then I'm working with another director, wonderful Algerian director by the name of Karima News. And so we're preparing a feature film, which is actually about Catherine Parr, who was the last and remaining wife of Henry VIII.
So it will be like an historical film, right?
Well, it is, but it's actually, I'd say it's surprising. It's not going to be an obvious period drama. He didn't even know who Henry VIII was when we started working on it. So I think we're bringing a very different kind of eye to a historical story. Actually, it's more of a thriller in a funny way than your obvious sort of period drama.
You don't like serials, do you?
No, it's not that I don't. It's just that, my background really has been feature films, and that's what I, grew up doing, making, and I'm definitely interested in doing a series. I think it can be a wonderful format. It's sort of the difference between the short story, which you do in a feature film, and then, the major great novel.
Since 1 year, most films have been seen only on Netflix or other platforms.
Yes.
That cinemas are mostly closed all over the world. Is there a big difference between a film and a series if they are seen on the same way?
Well, I think, with a series, you just get more. If it's good and you love it, you can just get more and more of it. With a film, it's finite. And I think there is something exciting about the potential of doing a series where you can just sort of keep exploring the story and the characters. It's a bigger tapestry, a bigger canvas.
And you have something in mind?
I have a couple of things that I'm working on. Yeah, I do.
To be a producer, there is a lot of risk involved.
Yes.
Have you been frightened? Even with this very film, Dig, before it came out, were you nervous about it? Were you anxious?
Well, of course. And it was very, very hard to get made, actually. I had many, 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 many sleepless nights. And I think only now, I'm still in post-traumatic stress from what it took to get it done.
Why? Because people didn't want to invest.
There were people that were investing, and then they decided when we were very, very already advanced in making it that they didn't want to keep doing it. And so I had to, basically Netflix saved my life.
So the career of a producer, whatever quality of film, it's an up and down, right?
Absolutely. And as they say, you're only as good as your last movie.
It is a gamble, right? Because sometimes a good movie has no success. This film could have had no success.
Yes.
And maybe another one that is less good, would have had success.
Absolutely. No, it's a crazy business. I mean, I don't encourage people to do what I do.
So why do you do it?
I think it's become something that sort of stronger than myself. And it is a kind of probably an addiction. And I'm crazy. I mean, you do have to be crazy to do this. But I love it. I love telling stories. I love working with people and making things together. You know, it's a joy, you know, when it comes together.
And besides the very films you produce and the fact that you talk and you worked a lot with English actors, where is the cinema today most alive? You think there is a lot of liveliness in the cinema today, and where is the talent?
Well, I think what's interesting is that I think it's much more universal, actually. And I think that there's a lot of filmmaking going on that's much more sort of domestic. You know, if it's in Asia, if it's in South America, there's a lot more indigenous cinema. And I think that's very exciting. And I think there are a lot of new voices and new storytellers coming out. And that's a very exciting thing about the world that we're living in and the times. There are many more opportunities for more people. And I think it's more democratic in that way, actually. So I think that's exciting. And I think it's how, you know, we learn about other people. We always have. But I think that an interesting thing about Netflix, too, is that, you know, people are watching things that they would never see in other languages. And subtitles are not daunting to people in the way that they used to be. People are much more comfortable with them.
So you think that the world of internet has helped a great deal, one way or the other, your profession? I mean, the film.
I'd say that probably there are pros and cons. And I'd say that's probably true in a lot of things. And I think that we're definitely having to...
Can you tell me some of the pros and can you tell me some of the cons?
Well, I mean, I think the pro is that, you know, there is this amazing collective conversation going on right now. And people are watching the film all together at the same time, whatever time difference is, and that there is sharing conversation. I don't do social media, but friends that do are just, you know, saying that there's so much of a conversation going on now about this film. And I think that's exciting. You know, that's definitely a completely contemporary modern phenomenon.
And what against?
And what against? Well, I think it's hard right now because we're living in this pandemic, and that's also had such an effect. So I'm a bit of a Luddite, I have to say. So that's just me. But I do think that there's more positive than negative, you know, in the whole technological revolution. I just think that we're having to make a lot of adjustments.
But anyway, films, or at least your films, very often are originated by a book. And also there's a lot of writing to write a script, and the script has to be good. Whatever vehicle there is, you think that ultimately cinema has really changed? You were talking about the fact that nowadays, first of all, most people in the world can read English, therefore they can read subtitles. And also the fact that you can see this film in London, where I am, in Kenya, where you are, in Timbuktu, in New York, and dialogue on the internet, you know, with people in New York and people in Timbuktu and people in London in the same time, right? Which is not the case normally, wasn't the case before.
No.
But this is vehicle, it's a communication vehicle, but the movie in itself still deserves a good story, a good dialogue, a very good acting, and a good director, right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I'm a huge reader. I mean, books are a very important part of my life. So I think that maybe people don't read as much as they should anymore because they're so distracted by all the things that they can do on their computers.
Yeah, but it seems that you prefer to produce movies coming one way or the other from books or from theater.
From books, from theater, and, you know, and true stories too. I mean, I think there's often something just, you know, extraordinary about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Truth is stranger than fiction often. You know, right now I'm going to be producing a film which is based on the true story of the little boys who got captured in the cave in Thailand a couple of years ago. Do you remember that story?
You're doing a fiction or a documentary?
It's a scripted film. It's a feature film.
Whatever vehicle there would be, you are optimistic about cinema, right?
Absolutely. I'd love to own a cinema and have like a movie palace. I mean, maybe it'll go back to being a much more special experience and outing.
To go to the movies.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's already changed, right? It's becoming more of a social experience. You go to a movie house to have tea, you can have a glass of wine, and
Yes.
chairs are more comfortable. I mean, it's more like a social experience, right? Than
Yes.
it used to be.
That's true. And I think that will probably be more so when we can go out again and be together.
You see a lot of actors for your work. Are they very frustrated in this period where there are no theaters, where shooting is more difficult and so on and so forth?
Oh, it's heartbreaking. It's so difficult.
There are other actors that you would like to work with? Are there some dreams
Absolutely.
you have?
I'm superstitious, so I'm not going to talk about it.
You don't know yet who's going to be the wife of Henry VIII?
Well, I can't say yet because I'm not 100% sure. So I don't want to put any... It's somebody I'm very, very excited about working with if it works out. Somebody I've always wanted to work with. So that's very exciting.
English?
No.
But the wife was English?
Yes, of course. But this person can be English.
Why?
Well, she's an actress. She's a great actress. So part of being an actor is about self-transformation. You know, what Ralph did in The Dig, his background is very, very different from Basil Brown, but he wanted to know who that person was and became very, very close to him so he could play him.
Also the language probably different, right?
Yes, but great actors can do all sorts of accents.
Would you like to be a director yourself?
In the beginning, that was really what I thought I would do. I'm not going to rule it out. I'd have to know that I was the right person to tell that story, but it could happen.
You would like it to happen?
Yes. I mean, if you put yourself so much on the line and, you know, your vulnerability when you do that, you know, you have to know what you're doing, which I think I would.
What is the real talent of a producer? I mean, being a producer, when they shoot a film, for instance, this very one, what is your role? How much you intervene into the film?
Well, I'm there all the time. And I think the big thing is I'm there to be supportive and helpful and nurturing and make sure that people are being taken care of, and being treated properly and being heard and getting what they need in all, you know, aspects, not just the actors, but also the heads of department.
You don't tell this because it's not very poetical, but you have to pay attention also to the financial aspect, I guess, no?
Of course, yes.
That timing is respected, that expenses are reduced, no?
Yes, and making sure that the money is on the screen and it's not getting spent on things that it shouldn't get spent on. So all of that, all the detail.
Is it still time for big film, blockbusters, or you think they cost too much and the result is not so great?
It's so strange now because, I mean, all these blockbusters are just kind of waiting. Or, I mean, the fact that James Bond has not come out yet and it keeps getting pushed and pushed. We'll see. I don't know. They're not the kinds of films I know how to make or want to make. It's not a part of the industry that I'm that tuned into. But I guess it's a certain kind of entertainment and there's a public for it. And I guess if there's a public for something, there will be production.
Your production, your film is mainly British. So is the British state government giving some help to the movies? Do you think that after Brexit, there will be less attention, more attention? You know, what do you think? Is the state involved in this? I mean, are they giving grants or money or help or...
Well, there are film subsidies, so already there are tax incentives that help. And then there's the British Film Institute, which actually helps in the development and co-financing of films. Then there's BBC Films, which is an extraordinary support for the talent of British filmmakers. And there's also Film 4. So those are very, very important aspects to the local industry.
You had great success with Philomena in normal circuits of cinema. You're starting to have a great success with Dig in Netflix. Was it difficult to get to Netflix?
Well, yes, fortunately, as you go through working in this business for enough years, you know enough people who find themselves in different places. And so somebody I'd worked with years ago when he was at a studio became an executive at Netflix. And so it is a relationship business in that way. So even though it's changed, a lot of people have come out of the same kind of womb.
Yeah, but it's not obvious for everyone to get into Netflix, right?
Of course not. It's a hard business to get into.
Okay, but you love it, right?
I do. It's a privilege. I'm very, very fortunate that I get to do what I love doing.
Besides the fact that you may want to direct a film, you don't want to do anything else, right?
No.
So good luck.
Thank you.
Alain Elkann interviews.